Hello, my name is Teresa McDermott and I host a series of talks at the Gainsborough Hotel in Bath, Phenomenal Women. A series of inspired thoughts and ideas to share in association with Business West and Bath Business News. This is our third year, and whilst the hotel is closed, I would like to invite you to join me in a virtual event, hearing from past or new phenomenal speakers, all sharing their wisdom, warmth, compelling insight, and captivating stories. Today, I would like to welcome Jaya Chakrabarti, a previous speaker from June last year. She has kindly agreed to talk to us again today. Jaya is a scientist and was awarded an MBE in 2014 for services to creative digital industries in Bristol. A passionate advocate for engaging business with community through technology, she set up social enterprise TISCreport, Transparency in Supply Chains reports. This business was a finalist in 2 anti-corruption technology awards and is the world's largest anti-slavery register. In 2018, Jaya was one of the top 100 corporate influencers in modern slavery and also one of the top 100 Asian stars in technology. I will be handing over to Jaya now, whose topic today will be corporate activism in the time of pandemic.
Hello, okay, and well, firstly, thank you for inviting me. It's a real honor to be able to talk about this stuff, especially now that a lot of us are in lockdown and facing lots of thoughts that we ordinarily would spend our day jobs trying to use to get away from. And now we're in a position where we're dealing with a whole new world. Some of us are homeschooling, like I am with my husband. Some of us are having to take care of elderly parents. Some of us are having to watch while we can't take care of our elderly parents. And these are all things that are playing into our lives, and it's no longer about the day job. It's about the reboot. It's about what happens after. Actually, before we talk about corporate activism, I really wanted to talk a little bit about what gets you to the point where you can feel that you can be an activist, because like many, I've been feeling that paralysis, that fear, that anxiety that has been bubbling up in all sorts of ways through all sorts of things that would normally not challenge us, because of the sheer enormity of the situation that we're seeing now with the spread of COVID-19. So I'll make a confession. I'm an anxious mum. I'm an anxious parent, and consequently everything I do, all of my activism is drawn from me channeling that anxiety and that feeling of helplessness into things that I can affect. This doesn't necessarily work for everyone, and what I want to make clear is that I too have my days, weeks, where I don't get anything done, where simply doing the bare minimum is enough in this scenario. But it's important that we use this opportunity, not to do a whole new set of Coursera skills or Udemy or all of the other things that people think that you should be doing because you've got this time now, because actually it's headspace that matters when it comes to doing something positive. So part of the work that I've been doing has been inner work. It's been about self-acceptance and accepting what the situation is and facing it for what it is and where we are. I tend to get my feelings out and my thoughts out in blogs, and I do that, and maybe 5 people read it, and maybe 6 people read it after this particular interview. But it's important that we base our activism on someplace real, something that we can feel and something that we can really count on as a foundation. So I've spent a lot of time dealing with that and facing thoughts that I've run away from. Following that, I started to realize that my anxiety over the planet was not helpful. So I started to think about, well, okay, as I've done in the past, I understand where I cannot affect change, but maybe there are things that I can do. One of those things is using a voice. Another of those things is to identify where your influence lies and doing those things. So a little while ago, I started to write about this stuff. And so from the perspective in terms of my role as a business leader, someone who runs a business, albeit a very tiny one, I started to think about where our influence really lies. So you'll know, you refer to me as sort of like a former scientist. Well, once a scientist, you're always a scientist, and I focus on the data. So when there's uncertainty, you start to look for evidence of what the actual situation really is. So our day job with TISCreport is to monitor corporate behavior, monitor the impacts on labor exploitation or labor rights, on corruption, or on transparency. This has led me to work out what the key things we can do as business leaders in this time, that we can do from home, we can do from anywhere. We can start looking at our operations and really adjusting what we want to do when we go back, but also now. The first thing I identified, which everyone's talking about as a small business, is your suppliers. So if you've got suppliers and you are able to pay them on time, pay them on time. We discovered very early on that some of the biggest businesses in the UK and the world are terrible at paying their suppliers on time. Some of them, go well beyond the 30 days. They go into 90 days, 180 days. Well, we ended up with a 2-year situation ourselves, which was ludicrous. And the impact that has on a tiny business, on those that are trying to make ends meet, is massive. And then you think about the fact that those businesses that aren't being paid on time are also unable to pay their people and unable to pay their own suppliers on time. And the whole thing filters down into a whole series of insolvencies and horrible things that happen. We in the positions that we have in our supply chains can make a difference there. Simply by looking at who's the most vulnerable. If you can't pay everyone on time, well, pay the ones that you think are most vulnerable, and start to filter that out and start to ask questions about whether or not your buyers are doing that too. If you've got troubles, then we need to gather that evidence, make it clear, and make it clear what the impact is. So yeah, that was the first thing we started to do, was to make sure that we not only paid our suppliers on time, but we started to shout about it and talk about it and make the data really available. So we through our day jobs are able to show big companies, big councils, what their records are like in terms of late payment, living wage, and other aspects of what we would expect from a decent, better reboot. The other thing, as a tiny business, I started to do was look at the world that I wanted to invest in. So rather than look at my pension portfolio, which is probably quite minimal right now in its value and what's going on, and we can push that to one side, I wanted a world where truth mattered again. I'd say that as a data scientist, that we have seen the erosion of truth and alt facts and distractions coming up. I think Aldous Huxley said it really well, and I'm not going to quote him properly here, but effectively what he was saying was that man's infinite addiction to distraction has led us to this. So the truth has always been out there. We know what's going on. There are very important things that we should be paying attention to, and yet we are pulled into conspiracy theories and what Trump said next, and all of those things just overload your senses and give you a sense of helplessness. They remove your power. They detract from your power. So I started to think, well, I need to invest, even if it's a couple of quid a month, into a fact-checking charity. So I use Full Fact. I know that food is an issue, so I've gone to the food sharing Fair Share organization in the Southwest. And I also believe that independent journalism needs to be able to be stronger to hold the press to account, the big owned media. So I invest in that too. This process that I've gone through, everyone can go through. They can decide what is important to them. They can decide what world they want to invest in and identify some of those organizations that can help them get there. And it doesn't have to be, you may be a tiny business like us, it can be a couple of quid a month, but get it going, get it started, do it, and then spread the word. Because every penny that you spend in this regard can make a huge difference. And it helps tiny organizations, tiny charities make a massive impact in an area that we all feel helpless in, but we know they can do more. So I've called it invest in your future, the future you want, one donation at a time. But you can also invest your actions. So it's harder now with actions. We used to do work experience placements for kids leaving care. And obviously that's way out the window now, but it will come back eventually and we will continue to do so. But we also want to save the planet. So we're using our skills for that too. We're creating a technology called Varna, which is all about using data to increase afforestation. We're working with Friends of the Earth and many other partners to do that. Every single person has power to do something using the skills that they have. And if you can make the headspace, invest in yourself first, make the headspace, and then create a plan. You don't have to pivot your business to be able to start making face masks. There are people who are doing that. You don't have to get involved with the front line to do your bit. You can do things in many other ways. You can volunteer. You can make sure that if you furloughed your staff, you can point them to volunteering opportunities that can still make a big difference. And you can make a plan for coming back. You can make a plan now that we've seen what can be done in terms of remote working, how we can reduce that impact, how we can reduce waste. I have a feeling that if we can embrace the learnings that we've had from being at home, those of us who've had that luxury, we can make a big difference to everybody else if we continue that and not mindlessly carry on doing what we're doing. So the other thing that I've tried to work on, and it's a work in progress, is this concept that I've called kindfulness, which is obviously a blend of the word mindfulness and being kind. So we can talk about random acts of kindness, and that makes a difference. And the butterfly effect, we've all sort of read blogs about and posts about, and it all sounds really good. And we've shared a meme or two. But the idea of kindfulness is really directed, intentional kindness that is there to be a sustainable act, something that you set in motion, that you do regularly, be it a month, a day, a week, a year, whatever it is. Make that commitment to doing something, and doing something to achieve the world that we want to return to. For me, I've signed up as a volunteer with the NHS, and so I'm doing the odd bit there, though sadly not as much as I was expecting. And I'm going to carry that on. I've set up a neighbourhood watch. You don't have to do the same, but you can join your neighbourhood watch and you can start to become part of that community. Activism starts with connection. It starts with the businesses that you know. It starts with the people that you are neighbours to. It all matters. I don't think you can separate work and home life anymore. I don't think we can go back to that. One key thing that I wanted to say is that everyone is feeling overwhelmed in one way or another. And I've seen this come out in my social media feeds, people coping with it in different ways. Some people starting to realize that their sense of humor with some of those throwaway jokes that get shared, they can no longer take. And I think that's the feeling of helplessness, but people have to remind themselves of what I've called the power of one. You don't have to help everybody. You don't have to save the entire planet yourself. You just have to do one thing. You can help one person, one family, one neighbor, one, kind of get the idea, I think, that if everyone was able to do that one thing regularly, they would be able to play their part. And that is all that's all that's needed. I've done a lot of talking, but maybe Teresa, you and I can have a bit more of a chat.
Yes, yeah, no, that's a good idea. I think the interesting thing, because when I always think about, well, what can I do? You often think it has to be bigger scale. So you don't assume that any action that you undertake is going to have an impact. So that's quite interesting that you say that you can empower yourself and it can be effective. It would be perhaps at the end, if I take down the names of the organizations you mentioned, I'll add them to the feed so that people can sort of take a
I'll
look
send
at
it
them.
through.
But I think that's a really interesting idea, because I think particularly now you kind of feel as if you're sort of swirling around and you have no control over what's going on at all. And so your suggestions, I think, are very helpful. How do you address, I think one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, you know, a lot of families are at home. Some members of the family are having to deal with juggling more things than others. You know, some are having to still work full time, whereas trying to manage the home teaching and may have elderly parents as well. What suggestions would you have? What little nuggets would you have for them?
Right, so I'm struggling with this at the moment. So I'm what you call part of the sandwich generation, where I've got kids, but I'm a virtual sandwich generation person, because I'm unable to look after my parents who are far away in Watford, and I literally can't help them in very many ways other than online shopping and making sure that some of the volunteers at that end are doing things. I think we have to reduce our expectations massively and try and work on the basics first. So loneliness is one of the key things that we can tackle, and we can call them every day. We are lucky enough to be able to do the whole portal video conferencing type thing that Facebook does. So we're able to talk to, you know, my parents, my brother's family every single day. We spend about half an hour to an hour doing that with family, just simply that. I don't think we can underestimate the damage that can be done by loneliness. So that's the key one. Beyond that, I think, you know, I'm a list maker, so I just make lists of things that I could be doing. I check in with that every day. I've called it my tower, the tower that I must climb every day. So my tower has a list of things from business through to homeschooling, the links that I've got to do, and the things that I want to achieve with the kids. And I never achieve the whole thing. And if I get through 50%, that's a really, really good day. And generally 25% is good enough. So if people like me who get anxious can identify what good enough is, then do that. For yourself, start with yourself and get yourself into a place. We've been lucky enough to be able to do yoga at work for many, many years, and it's had a huge effect. My mind is a monkey mind. It talks faster than I talk now, and without the caffeine, it's not even manageable then. But the presence that you get from a yoga session, even if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or meditation, really helps. So part of our discipline here in the Chakrabarti Gallimore household is to do yoga for 5, 10, 15 minutes, just with the whole family, trying to get the focus. And you have no idea how much I learn from the lack of focus of my kids, because I see my own fractured attention reflected in them, but they're much younger and they have the excuse, whereas, you know, I don't. So get your headspace, work out what good enough is, and everyone is different in this respect, and just stick to that. If you want to introduce more, then, you know, that will be a sign that you've got the headspace to do more. But if you don't beat yourself up. Life is hard enough.
And for those, you know, many have been furloughed and, you know, face uncertain futures, maybe even sitting at home kind of thinking, well, is that still the role I want? Do I want to be rushing around getting the packed lunches ready in the morning, and then rushing the school run, and then rushing to the office and trying to fit everything in? So this is also a time, I would imagine, where people are reassessing their daily lives and how they want to shape that going forward. But then you've got that, I guess, I think it's for both men and women, but speaking from a female perspective, you always have that that sort of confidence issue about, well, oh, could I try something else? I don't know what your thoughts would be on the steps to take.
What, in terms of reinvention?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think lots of people are thinking about this at this time. I know I am, and I keep bringing it back to some of the simple things, I guess, that you identify that actually I rather like being at home. I rather like having this time with kids, or not. You can balance what you want. I think you start with creating space, not just in your head, but in your daily lives and your routine. So one of the things that we've been doing is to encourage the kids to make their own lunch and get their own breakfast, and some of the basics that you think actually just add that mental load. Doing the laundry, they're our boys. It sounds like slave labor, given that we're doing like an anti-slavery effort. We've been delegating a lot to the boys that ordinarily you'd be doing yourself. But actually it serves no one to make them so helpless that they can't make a piece of toast and put chocolate spread on it. So we've implemented a sort of a plan where they can start to take control over their, when they eat, what they eat, to an extent. Obviously we don't feed them full of chocolate spread. There's other bits that go in that are more nutritious, and we try and work it together. It's not a perfect system at all, but I do feel that they're benefiting from feeling more control over the aspects of their lives that they ordinarily just took for granted or didn't even see. And it's good for us as parents to be able to let go as well. So it might panic me a little bit that my 11-year-old is using a kettle that looks rather too large for him to pick up, or even the microwave, but these are things that they will need skills in, and it is therapeutic for us to enable them to feel that way. Once you've created the space in your schedule and your head, it becomes a lot easier to start to think about the skills you'd rather be using, and the people you want to be working with. The easiest thing to change is not your job probably, but who you do your job with in a way. It's the businesses that you choose to supply to work with or buy from, or the clients that you choose to work with. You can make changes there within reason once we've all bounced back and we're able to continue business as the new normal. But yes, you can identify areas where you can make the most impact quickly, but focus on the ones that give you headspace.
Right, so final question, and if you could just distill perhaps into four short sentences.
Oh God.
And you can take a bit of time, but I think for people, women who are just feeling a little overwhelmed at the moment with everything, 4 messages, 4 short sentences to help calm and perhaps get a little bit of refocus back in.
Okay, 4 short sentences is a big ask, Teresa, seriously. Well, maybe 4 thoughts, and I'll make them simple, I think, because I only work with simple. If it gets too complex, it doesn't work. So the first one, I think, is that if you're feeling overwhelmed, you start your day by reminding yourself that things are okay. So I start the day when I'm feeling a bit panicked. I start to say, well, yes, I've had enough sleep and there is enough time. That part of the reason is because when you're in scarcity mode, where you think like there's not enough time and everything's going really badly wrong, you make worse decisions. So if you can set up your day and your mind and your headspace to be open to the creativity that you innately have, then life is going to go a little bit better from that morning. So that's the one thing. I've had enough sleep. There is enough time. The second one is I journal. And journaling has been amazing. So you may not feel that you can meditate because of everything that's going on. You may not feel that you can do yoga, but journaling, write down your stuff, write down the things that are on your mind, offload as much as you can, because you may have anxieties that you go to sleep with and that you wake up with. But if you journal them, then actually it feels better. So it's part of your mental self-help, mental sort of first aid. It's one of the key things that you can use, and it doesn't take a lot. So journaling, really good, really helpful. It doesn't have to be prose. No one else needs to read it. It's for you. And yes, if you're working from home and juggling kids, please understand that everyone's getting it wrong too, or that no one's doing it perfectly. Please don't set the bar so high as women do. Women always do this. We all do this, where we set the bar impossibly high. Mothers coming back to work when they're trying to juggle breastfeeding and doing meetings. I remember one ridiculous situation when I was chairing a meeting whilst breastfeeding, thinking that anyway, that worked out not so well. We need to lower the bar, take a breath. And maybe the final thing is about remembering to breathe. Those of us who are short of breath, find yourself chewing your cheeks or doing sort of anxious lockjaw type scenarios. Breathe. Remember, remind yourself to breathe. Everything else will follow. Create the headspace. Everything else will follow. That was not 4 sentences.
No, but I can get four perspectives from that. So that's great. Thank you, Jaya. Well, thank you ever so much today for talking to us. And I really enjoyed it. You're always so inspirational. And thank you. And for everyone watching this, if you'd like to share, please do. And there will be others following. Okay, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much.